General Audience number 65 of November 18th, 1981. Quote, "You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God." Matthew 22, verse 9. Christ said to the Sadducees, who, rejecting faith in the future resurrection of the body, had presented the following case to him. Quote, "There were 7 brothers among us. The first married and died childless, leaving the widow to his brother, according to the Mosaic law of the Levi rate. The second did the same, so also the third, down to the 7th. Last of all, the woman herself died. In the resurrection, then, of the 7, whose wife will she be?" Matthew chapter 22, verses 25 to 28. Christ answers the Sadducees by stating at the beginning and at the end of his answer that they are quite wrong, because they know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. See Mark chapter 12, verse 24, and Matthew chapter 22, verse 29. Since the dialogue with the Sadducees is reported in all 3 synoptic Gospels, we should briefly compare the parallel texts. Witness to the power of the living God. Although it does not refer to the bush, Matthew's version, Matthew chapter 22, verses 24 to 30, agrees almost entirely with Mark's, Mark chapter 12, verses 18 to 25. Both versions contain 2 essential elements. 1, the statement about the future resurrection of the body. 2, the statement about the state of the bodies of risen human beings. These 2 elements are also found in Luke chapter 20, verses 27 to 36. The first element, concerning the future resurrection of the body, is joined, especially in Matthew and Mark, with the words addressed to the Sadducees that they know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. This statement deserves special attention because in it, Christ points to the very basis of faith in the resurrection, to which he had appealed in answering the question posed by the Sadducees with the concrete example of the Mosaic law of the Levi rate. Without any doubt, the Sadducees treat the question of the resurrection as a type of theory or hypothesis that can be refuted. Jesus first shows them a mistake in their method. They do not know the Scriptures, and then an error of substance. They do not accept what is revealed by the Scriptures, since they do not know the power of God. They do not believe in the one who revealed himself to Moses in the burning bush. It is a very significant and very precise answer. Here Christ meets men who consider themselves experts and competent interpreters of the Scriptures. Jesus responds to these men, the Sadducees, that mere literal knowledge of Scripture is not enough. Scripture is, in fact, and above all, a means for knowing the power of the living God, who reveals himself in it, just as he revealed himself to Moses in the bush. In this revelation, he called himself, quote, "the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and of Jacob. Of those, therefore, who were the ancestors of Moses in the faith that springs from the revelation of the living God. All of them have been dead for a long time. Nevertheless, Christ completes the reference to them with the statement that God is not God of the dead, but of the living. One can only stand this key statement in which Christ interprets the words addressed to Moses from the burning bush if one admits the reality of a life that does not end with death. Moses' father in the faith, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, are living persons for God, for all live for him. Luke chapter 20, verse 38. Although according to human criteria, they should be numbered among the dead. Correctly rereading Scripture, and particularly God's words just quoted, means knowing and welcoming with faith the power of the giver of life, who is not bound by the law of death, which rules over man's earthly history. It seems to be in this way that one must interpret Christ's answer given to the Sadducees about the possibility of the resurrection, according to the version of all 3 synoptics. The moment was to come when Christ would give an answer to this question by his own resurrection. Meanwhile, however, he appealed to the testimony of the Old Testament. by showing how to find in it the truth about immortality and resurrection. In order to find it, one must not stop at the mere sound of the words, but go up also to the power of God revealed by those words. The reference to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in that theophany granted to Moses, about which we read in Exodus chapter 3, verses 2 through 6, constitutes a testimony that the living God gives to those who live for him, to those who, thanks to his power, have life, even if according to the dimensions of history, one would have to number them among those long dead. The full meaning of this testimony, to which Jesus appeals in his dialogue with the Sadducees, could be gathered, still in the light of the Old Testament alone, in the following way. He who is, he who lives and is life, constitutes the inexhaustible fountain of existence and of life, just as he revealed himself at the beginning in Genesis. See Genesis chapters 1 through 3. Although due to sin, bodily death has become man's lot, and access to the tree of life, this great symbol of Genesis, was denied to him. See Genesis chapter 3, verse 22. Nevertheless, when the living God enters his covenant with man, Abraham, the patriarchs, Moses, Israel, he continually renews in this covenant the very reality of life, reveals again its prospects, and in some way opens up again the access to the tree of life. Together with the covenant, a share in this life, whose fountain is God himself, is given to the same human beings who, as a consequence of breaking the first covenant, had lost access to the tree of life and, in the dimensions of their earthly history, were subjected to death. Christ is God's final word on this subject. In fact, the covenant established with him and through him between God and humanity opens an infinite prospect of life and access to the tree of life, according to the original plan of the God of the covenant, is revealed to every man in its definitive fullness. This will be the meaning of Christ's death and resurrection. This will be the testimony of the Paschal mystery. The dialogue with the Sadducees, however, takes place in the pre-Paschal phase of Christ's messianic mission. The course of the conversation, according to Matthew chapter 22, verses 24 to 30, Mark chapter 12, verses 19 to 25, and Luke chapter 20, verses 28 to 36, shows that Christ, who particularly in the dialogue with his disciples, had spoken a number of times about the future resurrection of the Son of Man. See Matthew chapter 17, verse 9, verse 23, and chapter 20, verse 19. Does not refer to this topic in the dialogue with the Sadducees. The reasons are obvious and clear. The discussion takes place with the Sadducees, who say that there is no resurrection, as the evangelist stresses. That is, who cast doubt on its very possibility, and at the same time consider themselves experts on the scripture of the Old Testament and its qualified interpreters. For this reason, Jesus appeals to the Old Testament and shows on its basis that, quote, they do not know the power of God. Regarding the possibility of the resurrection, Christ appeals precisely to that power that goes hand in hand with the testimony of the living God, who is the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, and the God of Moses. The God whom the Sadducees deprive of this power is no longer the true God of their fathers, but the God of their hypotheses and interpretations. Christ, on the other hand, has come to bear witness to the God of life in the whole truth of his power that unfolds over man's life.